He stood at the counter of the small diner, his shoulders slightly bent, his jacket worn thin at the elbows. The smell of fried eggs and coffee filled the air, warm and familiar, but it did nothing to ease the tight feeling in his chest. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a few folded bills, smoothing them with his thumb as if that might somehow make them worth more. He was a single father, raising his young child alone, since life had taken a turn he never expected. Every day felt like a careful balance between hope and worry. He worked whenever he could, took whatever job came his way, and still it never seemed enough. Rent was always due too soon. Food was measured carefully. Nothing was wasted. Tonight, he had planned to buy the cheapest meal on the menu and take the rest of the money home. His child sat quietly in the booth by the window, swinging their legs, drawing shapes on the fogged glass with a finger. The father gave a small smile when their eyes met, one filled with love and guilt at the same time. They ordered a simple plate to share. As he waited, he noticed an elderly couple a few tables away. They sat close together, hands folded, their coats still on, as if they weren't sure they belonged there. The woman's hair was neatly combed, and the man held his menu with shaking hands. They spoke softly, leaning in so others wouldn't hear. "I think we should just get tea," the woman whispered Dot. The man nodded slowly. "Yes, maybe we can eat later." Something about their voices caught the father's attention. He didn't mean to listen, but the words felt heavy in the quiet space between clinking dishes and murmured conversations. He watched as the waitress approached them with a polite smile. "Are you ready to order?" she asked. The couple exchanged a look. The man cleared his throat. "Just 2 teas, please." The waitress paused for a moment, her smile fading slightly. "No food?" The woman shook her head. "Not today." The father felt a familiar ache settle in his chest. He knew that look. He knew that choice. It was the look of people who had learned how to pretend hunger wasn't their dot when his food arrived. He pushed the plate toward his child first, making sure they ate enough. He took small bites, slower than usual, his eyes drifting back to the couple. They held their cups with both hands now, as if warmth alone might be enough. His mind argued with itself. He told himself it wasn't his place. He told himself he could barely manage his own life. He thought of the empty fridge at home, the bills stacked neatly on the table, the quiet fear that visited him every night. But then he looked at his child again. He thought about the lessons he was trying to teach without words. About dignity. About kindness. About what kind of person he wanted them to become. He stood up before he could change his mind. The waitress was near the counter when he approached. His voice was calm, but his heart was racing. "Excuse me," he said. "I'd like to pay for that couple's meal too. Whatever they want." The waitress blinked, surprised. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "Yes. Please don't tell them it was me." She glanced at his worn shoes and back at his face. Something softened in her expression. "All right," she said quietly. He returned to his table and sat down, his hands resting flat on his knees. His child looked up at him. "Are we going home now?" they asked. "Soon," he replied gently. A few minutes later, he saw the waitress return to the elderly couple. She spoke to them, pointing softly at the menu. The woman's eyes widened. The man shook his head at first, then looked around, confused. When they realized someone had paid, the woman covered her mouth with her hand. Tears filled her eyes. They ordered a small meal. Nothing fancy. Soup and bread. But the way they ate, slowly and gratefully, made it feel like a feast. The father looked away, not wanting them to notice him watching. He didn't want thanks. He didn't want attention. He just wanted to leave, knowing he had done one thing right that day. When it was time to pay, he handed over the last of his bills. The money felt lighter in his hand than it should have, but his chest felt strangely full. The waitress gave him a look that said more than words could dot. As he stood to leave, the elderly man caught sight of him. Their eyes met for a brief moment. The father gave a small nod and turned away before anything could be said. Outside, the night air was cool. He helped his child into their jacket and began the walk home. Each step felt heavier than usual. The worry returned quickly. He wondered how he would stretch the remaining days. He wondered if he had been foolish, but his child reached for his hand. "That was nice," they said softly. He looked down. What was nice? Helping those people. He swallowed hard. "Yes," he said. It was. They walked the rest of the way in silence. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows on the pavement. When they reached their small home, he tucked his child into bed and sat beside them until their breathing slowed. Later, he sat alone at the table, the quiet pressing in around him. He didn't regret what he had done, but the fear was still there. Life didn't pause for good deeds. Bills didn't disappear. Hunger didn't wait. Across town, the elderly couple sat together in their modest room. The woman wiped her eyes as she folded her coat. "Did you see his face?" she said softly. "He didn't even want us to know." The man nodded, staring at the wall. "He has very little," he said. And yet he gave. He reached for his phone, his hand steady now. He scrolled through contacts he rarely called. When someone answered, his voice was quiet but firm. "I need you to find someone for me," he said. "A man with a child." He reminded me of who we used to be. Back in his home, the single father turned off the light and lay down, staring at the ceiling. He didn't know that a simple meal had already begun to move pieces far beyond his small world. He only knew that tomorrow would come, just like always, and he would face it the same way he faced today, one step at a time, doing the best he could with what he had. The next morning came too fast. The single father woke before the sun, the same way he always did. The room was quiet except for the soft sound of his child breathing in the next room. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of the day settle on his chest. His first thought was money. It always was. He sat up slowly, careful not to make noise, and went to the small kitchen. The fridge hummed softly. Inside, there wasn't much. A half loaf of bread, a small carton of milk, a few leftovers wrapped in foil. He closed the door gently and rested his forehead against it for a second. Last night's decision replayed in his mind. The diner, the couple, the money leaving his hand. A part of him felt warm when he thought about it. Another part felt scared. He made a simple breakfast, cutting the last slices of bread in half so it would look like more. When his child woke up, they smiled sleepily and rubbed their eyes. "Morning," the father said softly. "Morning," the child replied, climbing onto the chair. They ate together, quietly. The father tried to act normal, but his thoughts kept drifting ahead. He had a short job later in the day, fixing a broken fence for a neighbor. It wouldn't pay much, but it was something. Still, it wouldn't cover everything he needed. After breakfast, he helped his child get ready and walked them to school. Along the way, they passed people rushing to work, cars honking, life moving fast. He felt like he was always a step behind it. When he left the school, he didn't rush home. He walked slowly, thinking. He told himself he would figure it out, just like always. Somehow, he always did at home. He rolled up his sleeves and started on small repairs around the house. He fixed a loose handle, patched a small hole near the door, things he had been putting off. Keeping busy helped keep worry away, at least for a while. Across town, the elderly man sat at a clean desk in a quiet room. Sunlight poured in through tall windows. The room didn't match the image people usually had of someone who struggled. It was neat, calm, and expensive without trying too hard. A man stared at a piece of paper in front of him. On it was a short note written by the diner waitress. She had remembered details. A man with a child. Worn jacket. Kind eyes. Quiet voice. The elderly woman sat nearby, hands folded in her lap. "I can't stop thinking about him," she said. "The way he looked at us." Like he understood. "He did understand," the man replied. "That's what troubles me." He picked up his phone and made another call. This time, his voice was firm. "I want to know who he is," he said. "Not for publicity. Not for show. I just want to meet him." The person on the other end hesitated. "That may take some time." "That's fine," the man said. "Do it quietly." Back in his neighborhood, the single father finished his small repairs and headed out for his job. The fence was old and broken in places, but he worked carefully, measuring twice, making sure it would last. The neighbor watched from a distance. "You always do good work," the neighbor said when it was done. "Thank you," the father replied. The neighbor handed him some cash. It was less than he hoped, but he nodded and thanked them anyway. Pride didn't pay bills, but respect mattered got as he walked home. He passed a small store and paused. He counted the money again. He went inside and bought only what was needed. No extras. He carried the bag carefully, like it held more than food. That evening, he picked up his child from school. They talked about the day, about drawings and lessons, and small things that felt big to a child. The father listened closely, nodding, smiling when he could nod at home. They cooked together. The child helped stir while the father watched the stove. It wasn't much, but it was warm. They ate, awed a little, and for a moment the world felt lighter. Later, after his child fell asleep, the father sat alone again. He looked at his hands, rough, tired, hands that had built, fixed, carried, and given. He wondered if the couple was okay. He hoped they were warm and full. He told himself that was enough. Across town, the elderly man stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. His phone buzzed. He answered quietly. "We found him," the voice said. "It wasn't easy." The man closed his eyes. "Tell me." "He lives modestly. Works odd jobs. No complaints from anyone. People trust him." The elderly woman stood and walked closer. "Is he struggling?" she asked softly. "Yes," came the reply. "Very much so." The room fell silent. The elderly man ended the call and placed the phone down slowly. "He gave when he had almost nothing," he said, "and we have more than we need." The woman reached for his hand. "What will you do?" "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I need to see him. Not as a benefactor, as a man." The next day passed much like the one before for the single father. Work, worry, care. He didn't know that eyes were quietly watching from afar. He didn't know that questions were being asked or that plans were beginning to form. All he knew was that life didn't stop. So he didn't either. That night, he tucked his child into bed again. "Are you tired?" he asked. "A little," the child said. "But I'm happy," he smiled. "Why?" "Because we helped people." He paused, then nodded. "Yes, that does make people happy." After the light went out, he sat in the dark for a while, listening to the quiet. His worry hadn't disappeared, but something else had taken root. A small sense that doing the right thing, even when it hurt, mattered more than he had realized not far away. The elderly couple sat together, planning a visit. Not with cameras. Not with attention. Just a knock on a door. Neither side knew what the next day would bring. But the path had already been set in motion by one simple choice, made without hope of reward. The third day began like the others, quiet and heavy. The single father woke early, dressed in the dim light, and sat on the edge of the bed for a moment before standing. His body felt tired in a way sleep didn't fix, but he pushed through it. He always did. After breakfast and the school walk, he returned home and cleaned, more out of habit than need. The small house stayed neat because clutter made his thoughts louder. He folded clothes, wiped the counter, and checked his phone for messages that never came. Got by mid-morning, clouds rolled in and the air grew still. He decided to step outside and fix a loose step near the front door. It had been bothering him for weeks. He knelt down with a few old tools and worked slowly, focused on the task. He didn't notice the black car at first thought. It stopped quietly at the edge of the street. Too clean, too polished for the neighborhood. Curtains shifted in nearby windows. Curious eyes watched. The car door opened and a man stepped out. He was well dressed, but not flashy. His posture was calm, his movements measured. He looked around, taking in the small houses, the cracked pavement, the quiet. The single father stood up slowly when he noticed him. His first thought was that something was wrong. The man walked closer and stopped a few feet away. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Do you live here?" "Yes," the father replied, wiping his hands on his pants. "Can I help you?" The man studied his face for a moment, as if matching it to a memory. "Were you at a diner a few nights ago?" "With a child?" The father stiffened. His heart skipped. "Yes," he said cautiously. The man nodded. "May I speak with you for a moment?" The father glanced around, unsure. "About what?" "About something you did," the man said gently. For a second, fear rose. He wondered if he had done something wrong. Then the man spoke again. "My parents were there that night." The father's shoulders relaxed slightly. "They were kind people," he said. "I hope they're well." "They are," the man replied. "Because of you." The father looked down. "I didn't do anything special." "That's not what they think," the man said. "And it's not what I think either." The man took a small step closer. "May I come inside?" The father hesitated, then nodded. "It's not much." "That's all right," the man said. Inside. The space was simple but clean. A small table. 2 chairs. Family photos taped carefully to the wall. The man looked around, his expression unreadable. They sat. "My parents told me everything," the man said after a pause. "They said you paid for their meal and left without saying a word." The father shifted in his seat. "They needed it more than I did." The man leaned forward. "From what I've learned, that's not true." Silence filled the room. "I've spent most of my life building things," the man continued. "Businesses, wealth, a name. Somewhere along the way, I forgot how to see people." The father listened, unsure what to say. "When my parents came home that night," the man said, "they talked about you like you were a reminder. Not of poverty, of dignity." The father swallowed. "I didn't mean to remind anyone of anything." "That's the point," the man said softly. "You didn't mean to." He reached into his jacket and placed an envelope on the table. The father's eyes followed it. "I don't want this to feel like charity," the man said quickly. "And I don't want you to feel uncomfortable." The father didn't touch the envelope. "Then why are you here?" The man took a breath. "Because I owe you more than thanks. You gave my parents something I couldn't buy for them." The father shook his head. "I just paid for a meal." "No," the man said firmly. "You gave them respect when they felt invisible." The room was quiet again. "I don't want your money," the father said finally. "I did what anyone should do." The man smiled sadly. "Not everyone does." He stood. "I won't push, but I'd like to help you in a way that doesn't take your pride." The father stood too. "I appreciate you coming. he said honestly. But I need to think. Of course, the man said. I'll leave my number. He placed a card beside the envelope and turned toward the door dot as he left. Neighbors watched from a distance, whispers spreading like wind through dry grass dot later that afternoon. The father sat alone at the table, staring at the envelope. He hadn't opened it. He wasn't sure he could. His child came home and dropped their bag by the door. Who was that man? They asked. Just someone who wanted to talk, the father replied. Was he nice? Yes, he said. He was. That night, after his child fell asleep, the father finally opened the envelope. Inside was a note. Simple, handwritten dot. Thank you for reminding my parents that kindness still exists. Whatever you decide, know that your act mattered. There was also a check. The number made his breath catch. It was more money than he had seen in years. He folded the note and placed everything back inside the envelope. His hands shook. Across town, the man sat with his parents. The elderly woman held her tea carefully. Did you meet him? She asked. Yes, the man said. He's exactly as you described. And the elderly man asked. He doesn't see himself as special, the son replied. That may be his greatest strength. The elderly woman smiled softly. People like him carry the world quietly. Back in the small house, the father lay awake. His mind raced. Hope and fear tangled together. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He only knew that a knock on his door had changed something inside him. Outside, the street was quiet again. But nothing felt the same. The next morning felt different, even though nothing around him had changed. The same narrow street. The same small house. The same early light slipping through the window. But the envelope on the table made the air feel heavier. The single father sat in the chair, staring at it. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, the number on that check appeared again. It wasn't just money. It was possibility. And that scared him more than being broke ever had. He finally stood up and made breakfast. He tried to act normal, joking lightly with his child, asking about school plans. His child noticed the envelope. What's that? They asked. Just papers, he replied, too quickly. The child nodded and went back to eating. Children accepted simple answers more easily than adults. Sometimes he wished he could after walking his child to school. He didn't go straight home. He walked aimlessly for a while, hands in his pockets, head down. He passed the diner again. It looked the same as always. People came and went. No one knew what had started there. He sat on a bench nearby and watched the street. He thought about pride, about help, about how thin the line was between standing on your own and accepting support. He had always told himself that dignity came from surviving without help. But now he wasn't so sure. Across town, the well-dressed man sat in a quiet office. He looked tired, though not from lack of sleep. His parents sat with him, the elderly woman holding a small bag in her lap. You shouldn't push him, she said gently. He's not used to this. I know, the man replied. That's why I left it open. The elderly man leaned back in his chair. You remember when we were like him, he said. Proud, careful, afraid of owing anyone. The man nodded. I remember. And yet, the elderly woman added, if someone hadn't helped us once, we wouldn't be here either. The man looked down. That's what troubles me, he said. I've helped people before. Written checks. Made donations. None of it felt like this. Because this time, the elderly man said, you weren't above him. You were learning from him. Back in his neighborhood, the single father returned home and sat at the table again. He opened the envelope once more. He read the note again, slowly. The words were simple, but they stayed with him. Your act mattered. He thought about his child's future, about nights spent worrying, about how often he had said no to small joys because there just wasn't enough. He thought about how tired he was of pretending everything was fine. Still, something held him back. That afternoon, a knock came at the door. His heart jumped. For a moment, he feared it was the man again, or someone else asking questions. He opened it carefully. It was the elderly couple. They stood there, hands clasped, looking unsure. The woman smiled softly. "We hope we're not intruding?" He was stunned. No. Please come in." They stepped inside, moving slowly, looking around with gentle eyes. "We wanted to thank you properly," the elderly man said. "Not with money, with words." The single father gestured for them to sit. "You don't owe me anything." The woman reached out and touched his arm. "You don't understand," she said. "You helped us remember who we are." The man nodded. "We used to be like you, hardworking, careful. Then life changed. We lost things, found others." The father listened quietly. "You didn't just buy us food," the woman continued. "You saw us." The father felt his throat tighten. He looked away. "I just did what felt right." "That's why it mattered," the man said. They sat in silence for a moment. Then the elderly man spoke again. "Our son told us he gave you something." The father nodded slowly. "He did. And how do you feel about it?" The woman asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "Grateful, afraid, confused." She smiled. "Those are honest feelings." The elderly man leaned forward. "Help doesn't erase your strength," he said. "Sometimes it reveals it." After they left, the house felt quieter than before. The father sat alone, replaying their words. He realized something then. Accepting help didn't mean he hadn't earned his place in the world. It didn't erase the nights he struggled, or the days he kept going when he wanted to stop. It just meant he didn't have to do it all alone. That evening, he picked up the phone and dialed the number on the card. His hand shook slightly. The call connected quickly. "I was hoping you'd call," the man said. "I don't want charity," the father said immediately. "I know," the man replied. "Neither do I." They met the next day in a simple cafe. No suits, no attention. Just two men sitting across from each other. "I didn't come to rescue you," the man said. "I came to offer a path." He explained calmly. Not promises of luxury. Not easy solutions. A steady job, training, a chance to build something stable. Something earned. The father listened carefully. "You saw my parents when no one else did," the man said. "I'd like to work with someone like that." The father took a deep breath. "I'll try," he said. That night, he tucked his child into bed. "Things might change," he said softly. The child looked up. "Good change or scary change?" He smiled. "Both." "That's okay," the child said. "We'll do it together." He turned off the light and sat for a while in the quiet. For the first time in a long time, the fear didn't feel endless. It still existed. But now, there was space beside it for something else. Hope. Not loud. Not perfect. Just enough to keep going. The change did not happen overnight. It came slowly, in small steps, the way real life always does. The single father still woke up early. He still made simple breakfasts. He still walked his child to school with the same worn shoes and quiet thoughts. But something inside him had shifted. On his first day at the new job, he stood outside the building for a long moment before going in. It wasn't a tall glass tower or a place that made him feel small. It was simple, solid, and calm. He took a deep breath and reminded himself that this wasn't a gift. It was an opportunity he had chosen to accept. Inside, he was treated with respect. Not pity, not curiosity. Just respect. He was shown what needed to be done and how things worked. No one rushed him. No one talked down to him. That alone meant more than he could explain. He worked hard. Harder than anyone expected. Maybe even harder than he needed to. Old habits didn't disappear easily. He checked his work twice. He stayed late when it mattered. He listened more than he spoke. At home, things slowly began to feel lighter. The fridge wasn't empty anymore. The bills stopped piling up. He could breathe without counting every breath. His child noticed the difference before he did. "You smile more now," the child said one night. He laughed softly. "Do I?" "Yes," the child replied. "Even when you're tired?" He realized then how much his worry had shaped their days. How much weight his child had carried without ever being asked to. Weeks passed. Then months. One evening he received an invitation. Not formal. Just a simple message asking him to join a small family dinner. He knew who it was from. He hesitated at first, then agreed. The elderly couple welcomed him like an old friend. The table was modest. The food was warm. The conversation was easy. "We're proud of you," the elderly woman said. Her eyes gentle. "I'm just doing my job," he replied. "That's exactly why," the elderly man said. Later that night, as he walked home, he thought about how strange life could be. How one small choice could open doors you never knew existed. He thought about the man he used to be just months ago, counting bills at a diner counter, wondering how he would survive another week. He hadn't become rich. He hadn't been rescued. He had been seen. And sometimes that was enough to change everything. One afternoon, he passed the same diner again. He paused outside, looking in through the window. A different crowd, different faces, but the same quiet moments happening inside. The same small struggles no one noticed. He went in. He ordered a simple meal and sat by the window. Across from him sat a tired-looking woman with a child. She counted coins quietly, her face tight with worry. He felt something familiar rise in his chest. When he finished eating, he stood and walked to the counter. He paid his bill. Then he added a little more. "For that table," he said softly. "Please don't tell them it was me." The waitress nodded, understanding without questions. As he left, the bell over the door rang softly. He didn't look back. That night, at home, his child asked, "Why do you still help people when we don't have to worry as much now?" He thought for a moment. "Because someone helped us when we didn't expect it," he said. "And because kindness doesn't stop once your life gets better." The child nodded, satisfied with that answer. Across town, the well-dressed man stood by his office window, watching the city settle into night. His parents sat nearby, quietly talking. "He's doing well," the elderly woman said. "Yes," the man replied. "And so am I?" "What do you mean?" The elderly man asked. "I remember now," the son said. "What success is supposed to feel like." The elderly couple exchanged a smile. Back in the small house, the single father tucked his child into bed. He sat beside them longer than usual, listening to their steady breathing. He thought about the future. It still held unknowns. It always would. But the fear no longer ruled him. He knew now that strength wasn't about doing everything alone. It was about knowing when to stand firm and when to accept a hand. Before turning off the light, his child whispered, "I'm proud of you." He swallowed hard. "I'm proud of you too." When the room went dark, he lay back and closed his eyes. The world outside continued as it always had, full of struggle and hope mixed together. Somewhere, someone was making a quiet choice, just like he once did. And somewhere else, that choice would matter more than anyone could imagine.